Hey everybody, I'm just doing a quick review of a product by TRE Games or TRE Games Incorporated. I had never heard of this company. Just hadn't been something that came across my path either in forums or Facebook or anywhere as far as a terrain company. And but what I was doing is I was looking for a windmill for 28mm models, and I'd never been able to really find one in the past that was sort of fit the early Americana kind of look. I could, there are some really nice ones that are the post ones that are, all of these have been used pretty much in Europe. I mean, a lot of these designs prior to coming to the North America, but the post ones weren't as common in North America, although they were found. And so I didn't find them as representative. If I was doing Napoleonics, they'd be really good. But I wanted something, more Americana looking, and so I'd really kind of given up and hadn't been looking for a while. And then one day I just ended up looking for one. I think I saw one by Foreground that was primarily geared towards the European theater. I just happened to see it and I said, well, I'm going to look again. And long story short, I came across TRE Games. And so received this, and I built this fairly quickly. It is probably about an hour, I'm going to say, if you kind of know what you're doing and you're comfortable and maybe you've done it already. I took my time and I took a little longer so I could fit things, and I had to fiddle with certain steps, adjust a couple of things, but for the most part it went together really easily. Before anybody asks, it is a fixed windmill, like it doesn't turn, and so this is fixed, doesn't spin. So I'll talk a little bit more about the finished product in a moment. I'll just mention a little bit about my experience building it. You get this in a plastic bag, nicely packed, and directions are actually not bad. For those of you that have seen me open up terrain directions in the past, you'll know that I can be difficult on the directions, like is the hardest part of my review at times. I do find that they oftentimes are lacking, and this one does go sequential and is numbered, so that might sound like a fairly simple thing, but many people don't do that. Hence some of my issues in the past. So this is fairly good in that regard. Language is quite appropriate. There isn't much specific, like they do refer to the sails on the windmill as sails, and there are a couple of things, but for the most part it's not architectural language. It's pretty much just common language for most of these things. And I'm going to say that there's one or two things I had to figure out, but looking at pictures and just at the end of the day, they were not fundamental to the process. I found the way that it fit was not amazing in some regards. The way that the actual walls fit on what would be a hexagon sort of shape for the base. This is essentially 6 corners, 6 faces, and for this. And I did have to kind of pull it apart and put it back together a couple of times while the glue is still drying to get this thing to really fit in a way that I deemed appropriate. I don't think that I had done anything too bad. I noticed some gaps on the porch in between these pieces, but when looking at the picture online, there's also gaps, and even in the instructions here, there is a gap there. I think it's fine, to be honest. Just a small gap. They're pretty equal all around. I do think, there were a couple of optional things, like I did some of them, I didn't do some of them, but there were a couple of optional things to do on the kit. But I do think it's a really nice looking kit. It's not the same as all of the MDF that I've used. I would say it's more of a wood, like plywood style feel, and it's closer to the boats that I have done recently a review on. I think it was maybe last Christmas, or maybe Christmas before, time flies. But I did a review on some boats, and it had a very similar feel of wood, like actual wood, to this. And most of the fit within the sprue, it could pop out. None of them really fell out on their own, which was nice. You don't lose parts. There's usually between 1 and 3 joins that you do have to cut, and they're actually pretty tough. Like, you have to put some pressure with a hobby knife, and I definitely sanded the joins, but not much work. I would say actually that part I really quite liked for it. So before I talk about like the scale, I'll just say that I really do like the look of it. It's really what I was looking for. At the end of the video, I'll show a picture of a couple of the lighthouses, or I'll just show them now. Just ones that kind of inspired me, is ones that I was kind of looking for, and you'll see that, you know, they really do vary quite a bit in size. I mean, just like today, even with energy, windmills are all different kinds of sizes depending on kind of energy you want, and that was really always the case, and that you can make them all different kinds of sizes to accomplish different goals and to different degrees. And, you know, most of my, what I'm doing in musket tomahawks and sharp practice, I'm not really looking for like a centerpiece that's going to be the entire table, like a windmill. I really want something that would be like on a homestead or a community that would be fairly realistic to the setting that I'm playing these games in. And I think this actually fits that really well. So from that perspective, quite happy with it. There are some interesting roof components here. It has almost like a double roof system, which I thought was really kind of neat. Interesting to put together, but it works. Definitely don't have a big problem with it. And this was actually quite easy. I would have thought that the sails, you know, and doing this part of it would have been a really big part of it as far as difficulty and how that would work. It's actually quite simple, and so not too hard of a kit in that respect overall. So I do think it's going to be an excellent little terrain piece to add to my collection. I've had a couple of pieces that I've really been looking forward to adding to my collection that are not typical. This is one of them. So quite excited. Before I talk about how I'm going to paint it, I will say, like, here I have 2 miniatures here, one just because I'm getting ready to paint it, and the other one that I've just had here because I had to touch it up at one point from a game. On the base here, which is not that far from the height of the porch on the ground, I'm just going to pan for a moment. I'm going to just level this camera so you can, my tripod, so you can see it at eye level. So as you can see here, I have my 28mm figure. Minden miniatures are, which is what this is, they're my preferred miniature, and they are, for this period, and they are not a heroic scale, but their height is fairly true. And so if you put one of these guys next to some of the heroic scale models, you might think he'd be shorter when I talk about Minden's design, but they're not. They're actually around the same height, in some cases even taller, but they tend to be a bit more slim. And so when I have him up towards this door, just with the base, and so he's sort of at level with this plank for the most part, you can see that he's kind of tall. And this kit is right on the front, says 28mm. I'll just kind of show that here. Let's see, 28mm windmill for 20mm models. I'm going to say that it's probably more suited to 25 in some ways. And I'll show the Crusader, or the Crusader miniature. Crusader miniature is actually still a little tall. They're about similar heights between the two of them. That's from Warlord, but you know, they were, I believe, Conquest, not Crusader. Sorry, I believe it was Conquest that Warlord bought. So a little tall, and certainly if you're going to really be picking, like, put the base on there and want the figure to be with the base, like within the doorway, then it's going to be tall. However, a couple things I'd say is that if you actually look at some of the windmills, real windmills, some of the doors were actually quite low, and in general for houses at that time. But then also, if you took a structure that wasn't like an everyday using structure, maybe that you, not to say that people wouldn't go in their windmills a lot, but for grain or whatever they were using, but a lot of these structures had like really, really smaller features and things like doors and things like we'd never even imagine. If you go to your historical villages in North America for this time period, both Canada and the U.S. It's amazing how small some of them are. I wouldn't say in the houses the doors were quite this small always, although with some of the what they call oh gosh, I'm escaping me the name, but the sod houses, soddies, where they just literally like take sod that you would like put on your lawn, but they just stack like flats of sod and just make like a house out of it. It's amazing. But they'll be smaller, like they'll be this small, even smaller maybe. So it's hard like to judge it. I don't know if that was their intention when they designed the kit. I'm not really fussed with it. I'm gonna pan back out again. As you can see here, I've pulled back and I still can't even get to the top of the sails. It's actually a big structure still. And so I actually think it's going to fit quite nice on my boards. I'm quite looking forward to it. I don't know, I'm interested in what your guys' thoughts are. I'm not really going to do a vote, but my thought for painting it, so I'm off of the review now. That's my review. Quite happy with it. I do recommend the company, but I'm just very honest here about the scale in case somebody's really finicky about that. I want you to be aware of that if you are concerned about that. It also is not something that it's designed for you to open and put your guys in. Like this is a feature piece. It could be used to block line of sight, could be used as cover, but it's not something you open and have guys go in, at least where you're going to move them around inside. So as far as painting it, my favorite building that I've probably done so far as painting, not the kit per se, but my paint job is my barn. And I just really liked the wood effect that I achieved on it. And I've not done another building like it. I've done lots of buildings since it as far as paint jobs, but I've never done one where I've needed to do distressed wood. I was kind of thinking I could go one of two ways. I could either make this a really well-maintained windmill where people have kept it painted like totally as if it's brand new, or I could go with a distressed look. And I was kind of thinking I might do a distressed look and do it very similar to the barn that I did. The only thing I was thinking is that I might make it such that they tried to keep up the sail, so I'll maybe do those white and then like another color for the roof, perhaps red like the barn, like the exact same color. Almost like you could have them on the same homestead. I know many farms in northern Alberta will oftentimes match their main homes and their barns and different structures to be the same color. I could actually plug Osterwolf, a viewer here who I know lives up that way, and he would give his opinion on that, see whether he agrees. But yeah, and this is not meant to be, from Alberta. This is meant to be over on the East Coast, but I'm thinking that might be what I'll do. I'll either do the white on the sails or a distressed white, but then definitely the wood that's aging, like I did on the barn with a colored roof, is what I'm thinking. Because I really like the way that looked, and so I'm thinking it's time to try that again. Okay, so this is my quick review and plan for this model kit for the Windmill by TRE Games. Just as disclosure, I did not receive any... this was not gifted to me to review. That does occasionally happen, and I do that, and I give the same kind of review either way. I will actually, because I am talking about TRE Games and had a hard time finding it, I will put a link to TRE Games in the description below, should you like to also purchase one of the rare Americana windmills that are out there. Only one I've seen so far. Okay, talk to you later, everybody. Take care.